We're going to do a quiz on Java loops. So we have 6 questions in total, and it says how many times will this sentence here be printed to the console. So this is an example of a while loop. We have a variable called I of type int that stores the value 1. We have the keyword while, and we have here an expression that is going to evaluate to a Boolean value, so either true or false. And inside we have a system.out.println, and it's a string here. And then on the next line we are incrementing the value of I. And it tells us, it's asking us how many times will this code run inside here. Well, it's going to be 99 times because it starts at 1 and then it runs the code, it checks the, first it checks the Boolean value here, it checks the result of this expression, and then it runs this code if this is true. So once it enters in the loop, and then it increments. So it's going to start I is 1, runs once, then I is going to be 2, runs once, I is going to be 3, and so on and so forth until it reaches 99. And after that, it's going to go to 100, and then it's going to check again. Is 100 smaller than 100? Well, it's not. And this way, it will jump out of the loop. So therefore our code here, our sentence is going to be printed on the screen 99 times. In question number 2, it says to rebuild the while loop as a for loop. As we learned from the previous lessons, whatever we can achieve with a while loop, we can also achieve with a for loop. So it's up to us, however we want to implement the code. But this is really important to remember, that if we want to write some code using a while loop, we can achieve the same result using a for loop. Okay, so these are interchangeable. Now in the code we have an example of a while loop. First of all, we have a variable called I of type integer, and it stores the number 99, and then we have the while keyword. And here in parentheses we have an expression that is going to evaluate to a true or false value, so to a Boolean. And then it says if this condition evaluates to true, then execute this code, so execute this line and then execute this line and then come out and then go back again and check again the code. Yeah. Now it starts at 99 and it says while 99, or the value of I, is greater than 0, print this on the screen and then decrement the value of I. So eventually this one is gonna be 98 and then 97 and so on and so forth until whatever value I has will be compared against this condition. So whatever the value of I is greater than 0, and this is going to become false, and then this way is going to come out of the loop. Okay, but until then it's going to keep on printing this on the screen and decrement our counter variable here I. Okay, so we have to rebuild this code that is a while loop. We have to rebuild it as a for loop. Okay, now in these boxes, in the first box we have to initialize a variable. Okay, in the second box, so this variable is going to serve as a counter, just the way this one serves as a counter here. In the middle box, we have to put some sort of a condition. So we have to put the condition that our code is going to test every time it runs. So this has to evaluate to either true or false. And then in the last box here, in the third one, we have to make a change to our counter variable that we have declared here. Okay. As you can see here inside, it will print the value of j. So j is going to be the name of our variable, just the way we had I up here, plus this text. Okay, so first in the first box we have to initialize a variable, and since we know we're working with numbers, it has to be of type int. Okay, so it's going to be int j equals 99. Okay, so it has to match this code here in the while loop. In the middle, we said we're going to test for a condition. The test for our condition was greater than 0. so greater than 0. So is j greater than 0. So we declare the variable here, so the counter, and now it's doing a test, a check on it. And then we have to change here in the last box, we have to change our value of j. And in this case, if we have a look at the while loop, it says minus minus, so to decrement our variable, which means for us, we need to say j minus minus, okay? So this is the version, the for loop version of this code, which is a while loop, okay? Let's check. Moving on to question number 3, it says, when would it be helpful to use a for loop instead of a for each loop when iterating over an array list of items? When you're worried about causing an infinite loop, that shouldn't necessarily be the case, because with a for loop, well, definitely a for loop is not more advantageous to use as opposed to a for each loop, because definitely with a for each loop, when you're iterating over an array list, you're not going to get stuck into an infinite loop. Actually, the for loop, this one, the simple for loop, would present some sort of a risk in case you don't check the condition properly, or you don't do the changes that you need to do to the counter properly. So this answer for me is out of question, so this wouldn't be it. When each item in the array list has a different value, this is not, it hasn't got to do with when would it be helpful to use a for loop as opposed to a for each loop when working with an array list. This, again, this has nothing to do with the actual values in the array list. When you aren't starting from the beginning of the array list, or when you don't know how long the array list will be. Well, when you don't know how long the array list will be, again, you would use the size of the array list. That gives you how many elements are in the array list. So therefore, I don't think the for loop will have an advantage over the for each loop. So therefore, I think the best choice would be to choose this answer when you aren't starting from the beginning of the array list. Because, for example, if we're using a for each loop, we can't really skip any elements in the array list, because that's the actual purpose of the for each loop, to go over each element in the array list. Whereas if we wanted to actually start, say, from the third element in the array list and to do some checks all the way to the end of to the last element in the array list, then we wouldn't be able to use a for each loop. So therefore, in this case, it would be really useful to use a for loop for that, okay? Because we can initialize the counter at the whatever index we want to start at, which is not possible when we're working with a for each loop, okay? So I'm going to say when you aren't starting from the beginning of the array list, it would be useful to use a for loop instead of a for each loop. Okay, so there you go, is mentioning the index, exactly what I mentioned before, that the counter in a for loop can be used, well, we can use in the counter the index of the element from where we want to start. Now, question number 4 says complete the for loop so that it won't cause an infinite loop. So infinite loop is when we're running some code, this condition in the middle box would be true, and we're not here in the actual code itself, we're not making any changes to the counter that we would put in this box. So because it's clear that here we're just printing something on the screen and we're not actually making any changes to the value of I. Of course, this would be if we're not doing the correct checks or the correct increment here, or change, increment or decrement, that is for sure. Whatever we would put in this box, if we're not doing it correctly, we could be stuck in an infinite loop. But let's see how to do this. So first, we need to declare an initializer variable here. Okay, so where do we want to start from? Well, let's say we want to start from 1, okay? int I equals 0, okay? We could have used this one because it starts at 0 as well, but it doesn't have the type of the variable. So if we were to use this one, because you can think, well, I, it's exactly 0, just the way it's here. But it would be incorrect to use this version here because it doesn't declare the type of the variable as well, okay? So we've declared the counter, int I equals 0, and then we have to give it a condition here. Say I smaller than 5, okay? It's a valid condition. And then if we know that we start at 0, and then we're checking, is I smaller than 5? So we're checking something and then we're printing something on the screen. So we know that we have to increment the value of I, because if we keep decrementing it, this condition will never be false. So therefore we would be stuck in an infinite loop. But instead, what we understand that we need to do is the fact that we need to increase the value of I. So we should be I plus plus, okay? Because it runs once, so it starts at 0, it runs once, it does the check, is 0 smaller than 5? Yes, it is. Print this, then increment. This increment here will make our variable, our counter, will make it to 1. Then it jumps here, is 1 smaller than 5? Yes, it is. Print it on the screen, and then increment it. So here, when it's running this one, now I was 1. Now when it increments it, I is going to become 2. So is I is 2. Is I smaller than 5? And so on and so forth. It's going to do it until it reaches I 5. It says, is I smaller than 5? No, it's not. Boom. And it jumps out of the loop. Therefore, this will not cause an infinite loop. Okay, question number 5. Complete the for each loop. Okay, so like we've seen in the previous example, this is going to be a for each loop where we need to declare the variable and the type of that variable, and then we have to add the colon. So for each llama in llamas, print this, okay? Or say hello to whatever element in here, okay? And then the last question, how can you modify this code so that it won't cause an infinite while loop? Okay, let's have a look. We have a variable called I of type integer, and the value is 7. And it says while, so we have a while loop, while the value of I is greater than 0, then print something on the screen. So if we know that in order to avoid being stuck in an infinite while loop, we have to make some sort of change here inside the code so that eventually this check will evaluate to false. So then it can come out of the loop as opposed to being stuck in an infinite one. So keep on running, yeah? So if I starts at 7 and we keep on saying is 7 greater than 0, so we keep on making this check. At this point, just the way this code is, this will be stuck in an infinite loop because it keeps on asking, is 7 greater than 0? Yes, it is. Print this, and then it goes back again. Is 7 greater than 0? Yes, it is. And so on and so forth. So it will be stuck in a while loop. But how can we avoid this? Well, by decreasing the value of our variable here, by decreasing this value. So by decreasing the I, yeah, the value of I. And we should put this right here on the right below system.out.println I, okay, inside the while loop. This is very important, okay. So we have to add I minus minus, not after the while loop, inside the while loop, okay. Okay, so this is the end of the quiz on Java loops.